day with some strong UV levels if you are out in the sunshine. Into Saturday evening, that cloud will melt its way off, so there will be some late sunshine that will turn into clear intervals overnight, but it's going to be another humid one for all of us. Again, 16, 17 Celsius, the lows. Then into Sunday, we are watching this feature as it pushes in from the west, provides quite heavy rain for Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, before it eventually moves its way into England, with some thunderstorms developing ahead of that. Potential for some torrential downpours and surface water issues. That cold front slinks its way across and opens up the door to some fresher air from the west, but it also allows these further low pressure centres to start moving their way in. So the weekend and into the start of the new working week looks like it will turning more unsettled, but also a little bit fresher. Bye-bye.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, news that has just broken. Get this, everybody. 1,700 men so-called asylum seekers to be housed at a disused RAF base in Essex. What on earth is going on? Surely we are asking for trouble. This, of course, comes on the eve of Armed Forces Day. Do you think we value our veterans in this country, or quite frankly, do you think we fail them? I know where I stand on that, but what about you? And the economy is in a mess. Some saying it is time for taxes to be cut. Many saying that that would be immoral. And did you see the news today about the help that will be offered to mortgage earners? Is it enough, though? Does it go far enough or not? Of course, we saw the very sad death now of the Titan 5. Awful situation, but some are saying this should be a red line. It should be time now to stop people going to gawp at the Titanic. Should it? Or, quite frankly, if you've got enough money, should you be able to do whatever it is that you want? Also, some good news for you today, because Just Stop Oil have been running riot, haven't they, up and down the streets of this country. Well, finally, everybody, finally, common sense has prevailed. You wait till I show you the video that I'll be playing a little bit later on in the programme. The police, you won't even believe your eyes, they finally get them off the road in 15 seconds. It is fantastic. It'll set your weekend off to a great start, trust me on that. And also, happiness. What does it take to make a happy society? We'll have all of that to come and more. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with the headlines.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. Mortgage holders struggling with repayments will be given a 12-month grace period before repossessions begin. It follows talks between mortgage lenders and the Chancellor this morning on what more can be done to support struggling households. Under the measures being rolled out in the coming weeks, borrowers will be able to extend the term of their mortgages or temporarily move to an interest-only plan. Well, yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% to tackle high inflation. Jeremy Hunt encourages people to ask their mortgage providers for help. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the government needs to take responsibility.
I think what people want is action, not words, and what we suggested is that there's a requirement on lenders to take these measures, because there are going to be many mortgage holders, many families across the country who are now even more worried about paying their mortgage. That's on top of all the other bills, and they know that the government's failed now for 13 years. They know the government crashed the economy last year. What they want, I think, is a much stronger sense that the government is gripping this.
Braintree District Council has lost an appeal over plans to use the Wethersfield airfield in Essex to house asylum seekers. The council brought legal action against the Home Office over the proposed use of the site to accommodate up to 1,700 male asylum seekers for up to 6 months. The local authority argued proposals would breach planning control, but 3 judges have dismissed the appeal, ruling in favour of the Home Office. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Luis de Souza shot Matt Ratana in the chest at a police station in Croydon after smuggling in an antique revolver and opening fire while still in handcuffs. As a result, the Independent Office for Police Conduct recommends handheld metal detectors should be rolled out by all forces. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has paid tribute to Sergeant Ratana.
Matt dedicated 30 years of his life to policing. He was nearing retirement when he was tragically murdered. He was an outstanding officer who brought joy to his work. He treated everyone with respect, with compassion and with good humour. In the days after his death, tributes flowed in from Matt's colleagues, from communities, from those he'd served and from those who knew him in his life outside policing. They were a testament to the man that he was.
A man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He's alleged to be the ringleader of a people smuggling gang. In 2021, 4 other defendants were jailed for their roles in the deaths. Strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved pay deal. More than 2,000 staff members were due to strike for 31 days throughout the summer. Unite Union says workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5 and 17.5%. Junior doctors in England will strike for 5 days from July the 13th. The British Medical Association says it's the longest single period of industrial action in the history of the health service. It's part of a long-running dispute with the government over pay and staffing. A recent BMS survey shows junior doctors are receiving more job offers to work abroad since strikes were announced 4 months ago. And the royal family were out in force today at Ascot. The King and Queen, they led the traditional royal carriage procession that was around the parade ring today in glorious sunshine. Following them in a carriage behind was the Prince and Princess of Wales. Kate was wearing a red Alexander McQueen dress and a matching Philip Tracy hat. And then behind them in another carriage was acting royalty, Dame Judi Dench, who was in the procession's fourth carriage. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Michelle.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight, alongside Michelle at Pickles, the director of Reform Think Tank, and Paul Embry, the writer, broadcaster and firefighter. Good evening to both of you. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three here, it's you at home. What's on your mind tonight? Lots of you getting in touch about that breaking story about that military base in Essex that now will house 1,700 men. What on earth is going on? Surely that is asking for trouble, isn't it? Or am I deluded and it's all going to be fine? Your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But that is the story that I want to start with tonight, as you've just been hearing. It broke literally about an hour or so ago, the fact that Braintree Council lost their appeal against the government. They didn't want these male migrants to be housed at the RAF airfield in Essex, but no, they said no, and it is indeed going to happen. 1,700 men at Wethersfield Airfield. Now, joining me down the line to get into this story, because, of course, you'll be familiar with the fact that it's 7 years to the day that we voted for Brexit. So, former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib is here with me tonight. Ben, good evening. You and I and millions of us, we voted Brexit, and one of the reasons for many people was to get control of our borders. When we sit here and we have record numbers of people crossing the channel, we have net migration of over 600,000 people, increasing the population. People say it's out of control. When we hear stories like this one tonight, 1,700 men to be housed in a base like this, I think the world is going mad. I think this is the exact opposite of what we voted for. Your thoughts?
Well, I couldn't agree more. Central to the case for Brexit, and championed by Boris Johnson and laid out very clearly in the Conservative Party manifesto of the 2019 general election, was taking back control, amongst other things, of our borders. And what does it mean to be sovereign if you can't control your border? And I'm afraid that the government simply hasn't understood that border control starts at the entry into British territorial waters of these boats. You can't exercise border control, as they've sought to do, through ever more complex deportation schemes and domestic laws designed to fight the problem once the problem lands on your shores. Actually, we already possess all the international law we need on our side to stop those boats entering our waters. And before, the inevitable pushback about this being a humanitarian crisis, they're coming from war-torn countries, we need to take a sort of very magnanimous, welcoming view of them. Don't forget these people are coming from France. They're already safe. There's no threat to their human rights in France, not that I'm aware of anyway. And so, we've just got to take control of our borders. And as I mentioned, we have all the international laws on our side. And unless we do that, Michelle, we're going to see much more of this. Rural communities, this is This is deeply rural countryside. We're going to see rural communities with these people brought into it. They're not going to be policed. They're not being locked up, remember. They'll be free to, go and come as they please. And that's going to damage the country. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's going to damage the country.
Yeah, of course. And it's not just this airfield either. I mean, there's other ones that we've discussed it at length. The one in Lincolnshire, the former home of the Dam Busters, for example, imminently set to receive their first, I think it's 250 initially, going up to about 1,800, 2,000 people. And I worry. If I was living in those areas, I mean, you're just going to have these people for up to 6 months, the one in Essex. They can't work. They've got nothing to do. And I mean, who thinks that this is... I'm almost lost for words as to who, Ben, would think that this was a good, safe, logical thing to do.
We tend to see we tend to see this through the cost of housing these people. And of course, that's a really important way to look at it. But there is, as we just touched on, the social fabric implications of taking men whom we don't know the origins of, who we know nothing about in terms of their background, their values, their views about the United Kingdom and what their intent is while they're here, and just dumping them into rural communities where there's bound to be division. You can't blame the communities if they're not happy about it. And obviously Braintree Council here sought an injunction against it. And bizarrely, the High Court judge decided he didn't have the legal authority to grant that injunction. He didn't even hear the case. He just said he didn't have the legal authority. So they appealed it to the appeals court, and the appeals court sustained the High Court's initial judgment. And, where do communities go if they have this kind of top-down enforcement of 1,700 people in this case, and thousands elsewhere, of people they just simply do not know, cannot understand their backgrounds, can't legislate for what they might do while they're in those local communities. It's just bad, bad, bad. And, when you were in your opening comments, Michelle, you mentioned this being Veterans Week. Well, there are 16,000 veterans sleeping rough. We don't give them this kind of priority. I'd much rather have them in an airfield than I would, these people of whom we know nothing.
And Ben, there'll be some people listening to this, my final question, and they'll say, pack it in, you guys, you're fear-mongering, you're projecting that these people are somehow dangerous people when they're not, they're just desperate people. What would you say back to that criticism?
Well, it's a fundamentally philosophically unsound comment to make. No one can equally argue that they're not dangerous and accuse us of unfairly accusing them of being dangerous. You can't have both things. The point is, the reason we have border control, the reason we require visas, is so that we can ensure that people aren't dangerous, that they don't have malintent, that they aren't criminals coming into our country. And I'm afraid it's a complete collapse in political will that we're not prepared to see that through into the actual control of our borders.
I know, I do. I feel like the world is going mad. But Ben Habib, thank you very much for your time and your response to that tonight. Paul Embry, and by the way, if you live in one of these areas, I've just mentioned RAF Scampton, we're talking here about Essex, how do you feel? Because if someone told me, right, Michelle, just around the corner from where you live, we're going to stick 1,700 men, we probably don't really know who they are. If we're to believe the stories, and by the way, I say this with a monumental pinch of salt, by the way, because I don't really believe a lot of the stories, but anyway, if I am to do as I'm told and believe that these people are desperate people merely in seek of kind of sanctuary and safety, despite the fact they were already safe, but I'll park that. Anyway, if I'm then sitting there and I think, but then if these people are coming from war-torn destinations, they have an entirely different culture to ours, an entirely different way of working, of thinking, of operating, of existing, from completely different worlds. You're picking them up and you're putting them en masse to the tune of 1,700 people. How can anyone think that this is a good idea?
Look, I agree, and I think it's an entirely understandable instinct sentiment to say, look, we're uneasy about this. If you're going to put 1,700 mainly young men whose background we don't know, and among whom there may be cultural differences compared to themselves and the native population here.
Well, there definitely will. It's not maybe. If you're genuinely coming from, I don't know, Sudan, Eritrea, wherever, there are huge cultural differences.
No, I get that, and you know, people around Wethersfield and other places that may be earmarked for this sort of scheme in the future will naturally be regarded as xenophobic and as Little Englanders and at the most extreme racists and bigoted. But actually, yes, I do think it's an understandable human reaction to be uneasy about that. But the problem is this: they have to go somewhere. You know, there's 1,700 men who have turned up, many of them, I suspect, undocumented on our shores. They're here. We can't just leave them homeless. We've got to put them somewhere. And it strikes me that an RAF barracks, the former RAF barracks, provided it's, you know, warm, provided it's civilised, is probably as good a place as any. And the truth is, we have not had a particularly fair dispersal policy in this country in recent years when it comes to migrants. It seems to me that most migrants end up in pretty poor working class areas. Where, you know, that puts pressure on already stretched public services and wages and so on. So I guess if there is to be a benefit, you could say, well, you know, there's places that are not necessarily used to getting migrants who are now receiving them. But look, there's a much bigger, more fundamental problem here, and it's the fact that the immigration system is utterly broken. There's no getting away from it. And for as long as that remains the case and there's not a serious plan to rectify it, which I don't think there is, these stories are going to keep happening.
Charlotte?
I agree largely with what's been said, and I think actually one of the biggest issues here is the scale of putting, as we've heard, almost 2,000 people in a really small
absolute disgrace.
Rural area, and I think that's right. But I think, you know, Paul is absolutely right that the people are here. I'm sure the government would be delighted if Ben has a solution as to how to prevent them crossing the water in the first place. I'm sure we'd all be delighted if there was an answer to that. But most people who say those sorts of comments actually don't have a solution to how you stop it. So once people are here, I'm uncomfortable with this approach. I think it is risky. I think the volume of people that we're looking to put in a really small community is not appropriate. But we do need to house them. And, you know, Ben said, well, we shouldn't really be thinking about the cost, but we are spending millions every day on hotels. I don't think most people think that is a sensible use of finances. But ultimately, again, I agree with Paul that we need to sort out the immigration system, because what we need is people landing here, rapid processing to make a decision as fast as we can as to whether they are indeed actual asylum seekers and they are desperate, or if they are economic migrants, or, you know, that they've lied about their age or whatever it might be. Because if we can do it quickly, we can send people home quickly if it's not appropriate.
The whole immigration debate, let's be blunt about it, is a running sore in our politics and in our society, which I think has got real fundamental issues for the whole concept of democracy. Because if you get millions of people time and again vote for a political party who promises to manage immigration properly. Most of these people are pro-immigration, by the way, in terms of the voters. They just want it regulated and managed properly. And if time and again they vote for a party which simply doesn't carry out its promises and actually makes, you know, you see the figures go up and up and up the whole time. If they vote in a referendum, as they did in 2016, because they wanted control of free movement, if they see an elite, a political class in this country, who essentially doesn't take their concerns seriously, does not have a serious plan for addressing the issue, then that's why populism surges, because people think, well, if the democratic mechanism doesn't provide me with an outlet to be able to get my views taken account of and implemented, and they keep ignoring me, then why should I bother with the ballot box? Let me take to the streets. That's the danger.
It's also very complicated, though, because, you know, people also want nurses and doctors, many of whom are immigrants. People also want to be filling vacancies, which many are immigrants. And look, I agree with you. It's a horrendous situation to think that you've made your voice heard in a democratic process and it doesn't happen. But it's also a very complicated area as well.
Well, I tell you, I want your thoughts on this at home tonight. I personally am absolutely appalled by this. I cannot get my head around why anybody would think on any level that this is a sensible idea. Yes, I hear people's thoughts about the £6 million a day. That is a scandal. It is a disgrace, especially when you look at people that are being housed in beautiful kind of country piles and all the rest of it. I think it's disgraceful. But I also, whilst I don't want to be spending millions of pounds on that, I really do not, I also think that public safety should be absolutely paramount. And this is the thing, I can hear it already in my ears, that people will be saying, oh, Michelle, you're a racist. But it is not racist to point out that if these people are indeed coming from where we're told that they're coming from, which are war zones, quite frankly, in a lot of places, then their experiences, their mindset, we don't know what they've been through, their hugely different cultural outlooks and all the rest of it. If anyone does not think that then getting these people en masse, sticking them into a unit somewhere with absolutely nothing to do, if you don't think that is a cause for concern, then quite frankly, you can call me all the names that you want, but I would suggest that you need to give your head a wobble. I do not think that this is going to end well. What says you?
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank, and Paul Embry, writer, broadcaster and firefighter. I was just having a little rant there about what I would call, it's just lunacy. If you've got a better word for it, do let me know what it is. That ridiculous decision to overturn the local council in Essex and place 1,700 men in a former RAF barracks there. A couple of you are asking, well, it's all well and good getting angry, Michelle, but what's your solution? Well, I'll tell you what my solution would be if I was running this country, and I'm not, as I always say, luckily for you lot. I would grow a pair, and I would actually implement... well, I don't even need to grow anything. I could identify as having a pair these days, couldn't I, quite frankly, and I'd be accepted. Anyway, I would actually implement the policy that I would be banging on about if I was Rishi Sunak, which is the Rwanda plan. I would charter my first flight, I would send some people over there, then I would start broadcasting on TikTok or wherever it is that people are promoting their schemes to get people on the dinghies. And I would be saying to people, if you come to the UK, you will be processed in Rwanda. And then I would be trying to stop the flow of people coming. And I would also be ramping up the amount of people that are processing these claims to move things along quicker. And I would also, look, I'm getting on the roll now. I would also have a list of places where I say... I know, it's my last point. It's my last point, and then I'll shut up. I'd also have a list of places I say, right, these ones... These countries, are they safe? We don't accept people from those countries. So all the rest of it, you know, what was it the other day? What was that country? Albania. Yeah, so I'd have all my safe countries and it would be like straight away, red line, no.
So what do you do when the courts, as they've done, intervene and stop the Rwanda system?
Right, what would be the punishment?
Well, I mean...
What's the punishment, right? So if Braintree Council, so they've lost their appeal, if the Braintree Council said, no, we're not going to facilitate this, we're not going to do whatever it needs, because I imagine it needs some work, what's the consequences?
Well, I suspect the councillors would end up in court themselves. If the councillors defy the law of the land as handed down by the courts and say we're going to declare a unilateral declaration of independence and have our own kind of free state of Braintree, I suspect the law would intervene very quickly.
It would be MOD property anyway, so what they'd have to do is physically barricade the property because they can't stop people going in it. They don't own it, right? It's a national government property.
I'm outraged, and I'll tell you why I'm outraged. It's not because I'm racist or all the things that people will say. You cannot, if you're telling me that they're coming from war zones and all the rest of it, as I said before the break, if that's true, then these people will be potentially traumatised. They have a completely different mindset in terms of law and order and all the different things. How is it safe to pick them up en masse and put them in a single entity? I'm outraged and I don't even live there. So I dread to think what you are thinking. If you do live there, get in touch with me and let me know your thoughts. It's just an awful situation. And by the way, we can pick up 1,700 people and put them in these barracks. Why have we got so many homeless people in this country then? Why haven't we picked up all those people and provided those people with housing? But anyway, I'm going off on a rant. I need to pack it in because I do have a co alongside me and they want to stay as well. Right, Rishi Sunak, you know by now, don't we? The economy is in an absolute mess. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not we should be lowering taxes. That is, of course, the point of a Conservative government, is it not? Anyway, some people on one side of the fence say, yes, now is the time to lower the taxes. Other side of the fence say it would be immoral. That is one of the pushbacks to do it at this point in time. We've also had a situation where we've got the base rate now increased to a whopping 5%. There's been a little bit of a meeting, a bit of a summit, where there's a little bit of help offered to mortgage owners, but not much. So pick whichever one of those topics you want, the tax or the mortgage. I'm going to calm myself down, quite frankly. You carry it. I'm going to spontaneously combust. I'm outraged. I'm outraged by the Essex story, everyone. Go on, Charlotte.
Some time out.
Yeah, exactly. Lay down.
I'll talk for a few minutes so you can have that
I'll
time
fan
out.
myself.
Exactly. Well, I'm not going to pick up is the point of Conservative government to cut taxes, which we could have a debate on. But I do think on this, you know, it's a really awful situation if you are a mortgage owner at the moment, and actually there are suggestions that the base rate could go even higher and hit 6%. So, you know, this is thousands of pounds more for homeowners on their who are going to have to be paying over the course of a year on their mortgage. Just on the mortgage bit, and I'm more than happy to pick up the tax bit, but I do think it's worth us just putting this in historical context. So interest rates were never low before the financial crash. So at the start of 2008, just before we had the financial crash, interest rates were 5.25%. And pretty much historically, right back into I think something around 1975 when we had the first rates. It's been well above that, well above that. The period we've gone through in the last decade is essentially an aberration, and people have got used to cheap money. People have got used to the fact that interest rates are so low, they don't need to think about it. And unfortunately, we're now entering a phase where that's no longer going to be the case, but what we're entering is a sort of return to normality, actually. This is what it always used to be like. Now, that doesn't help people right now. I think the stuff that's been announced today is actually very positive. So, you know, there are several things, people being able to go and get advice or ask about options from their banks without it going down as a kind of black mark on their credit ratings, being able to shift to interest-only payments for 6 months as a temporary measure, not allowing repossessions for 12 months if you miss a payment. These are really positive things, but ultimately people are going to have to adjust. And I think what the measures today that have come out will allow is that period of adjustment, but it's going to be really tough. It's going to be really difficult for people.
It is. Paul, your thoughts?
Well, I think the danger is we've got a recession looming in this country, and I think the hike in interest rates is going to make that a lot more inevitable, as well as impacting people in a very personal way. Now, what does a recession mean? We know what recession means. It's a catastrophe for the country. It means businesses going to the wall. It means repossessions of people's property. It means unemployment going through the roof. So it seems to me we need to do what we can to avert that recession. I think the rise in interest rate, as I say, it does the very opposite of that. And it seems to me, look, you know, we can talk about targeted tax cuts or tax cuts, universal tax cuts, and, you know, universal tax cuts tend to benefit, you know, the rich rather than the poor. So it seems to me the preferable option, and actually the necessary option at the moment, is to get real wages rising. We have got a situation in this country at the moment where we are seeing the biggest squeeze on wages since Napoleonic times. We are seeing year-on-year people's living standards fall as a result of the fact that their wages are not keeping pace with inflation. As I said, that's got implications for the wider economy. And we also need to be clear that what we're not seeing in this country is a wage price spiral. You know, we need to put that idea to bed. What we're seeing is the opposite. What we're seeing is people clamouring to try to make sure their wages keep pace with increasing prices. And if anything, the inflation is not being driven by wage increases. That's a myth. It's being driven by such things as the war in Ukraine and the opening up of the economy after the pandemic. And it's also being driven, by the way, by a thing that some commentators have described as greedflation.
Yeah, I agree.
On the part of businesses who are taking advantage of the situation and profiteering. I mean, we have got at the moment some of our companies, some of our corporations recording record profits. We're constantly told by the Tory government workers have got to show pay restraint. Well, I think it's entirely logical for a worker who is seeing inflation outstripping his or her wages to say, well, OK, in order to cover those extra costs, I'm going to increase my labour charge. But no, that's regarded as unreasonable. But when a business says, oh, as a result of inflation, our overheads have gone up, so we're going to increase our prices, the government says, oh, well, that's an understandable reaction to the situation. I think what we need to do, we need to do is have a bit of profit restraint on behalf of those corporations, including banks, by the way, now, who are going to profit humongously out of this interest rate rise.
Yeah, they're raking it in because they're not passing it on to the savers.
And let's have a bit of rebalancing in the economy. Let's try to avert a recession by getting real wages rising. And let's understand that these interest rate increases are going to cripple businesses and are going to cripple families.
What you just said, it's not
so 100% agree on this issue around greedflation, and it is disgusting that is what is happening. It is not true to say that the government are just going, well, that's fine. It's, you know, they hauled in a load of supermarkets. They've been hauling in various different industries in the same way they did the banks this morning around mortgages. Now, the question is, do you want to start putting in price caps? Because on the whole, those things don't work. So actually, it's not fair to say the government are not trying to put pressure on. I don't think they're doing enough to put pressure on to try and drive down those prices, but it's certainly not fair to say that they're not doing anything. The other thing to say is that...
Well, why don't they, for example, Charlie, why don't they, for example, levy a windfall tax on the banks who are going to be making huge excess and unexpected profits out of the interest rate rises? Well, they could make society a bit more fairer in a million ways with that sort of money. What about the corporations?
It's not going to sort the economy. It's not going to sort the recession or inflation or anything like that.
No, but what it could do, for example, is over the next few months, it could help to alleviate some of the real acute problems that people are going to be facing with their increased mortgage payments.
But what does that mean? What, giving more cash to people to pay their mortgages? We cannot get into a situation where the government, during the pandemic we paid wages. With the energy crisis, we started paying towards people's energy bills. The state cannot step in every time something happens and start paying for things. And let's remember the state of our public finances. You're absolutely right, they can. And you know what happened? May, I think was the last figures. Our debt, our public sector debt, for the first time since 1960, was equal to 100% of GDP. And last financial year, just to pay the interest on that debt, which who's paying that? Taxpayers, to pay that interest was about 110, 115 billion pounds. That is more than we spend on education in this country. In fact, it's 50% higher than we spend on education a year. So to say that the state can just keep spending this money is false.
Well, I'm completely in favour of the state intervening before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, as a Tory politician, actually, Michael Heseltine once said, if it's doing it for the right reasons.
And where do you get the money from? How are you paying for it?
In the middle of a cost of living. Well, I'll tell you how you pay for it. I mean, I've just mentioned the fact that some of our corporations are recording record profits. I've mentioned the banks and the energy companies. You've also got city bonuses.
But there is a windfall tax on the energy companies.
But hold on, Charlie. You've got city bonuses, which have been rising handsomely. You've got directors' pay, which has been rising handsomely. The truth is that over the last few years, some people and some corporations have done very handsomely out of the situation. Now, if it means that the state has to intervene using the power of the state in order to rebalance the economy, in order to tackle the grotesque income and wealth distribution disparities that are present in this country and have been exacerbated as a result of the last few years, then I absolutely think the state should be intervening.
Look, I think
there's no excuse.
I think this sounds great, and statements like we need to rebalance the economy are brilliant until you start getting into the how do you do it, and I don't think we've heard the answers for that.
Well, have you got the answers at home? How do you reckon we get to grips with the mess that we're in? Let's be honest, we are in a mess now, aren't we? Is it taxing the life out of the corporations to give us the money back? Is it? You tell me. And we talk about the rich and the poor and the discrepancy there. You might be struggling to afford, I don't know, a week in Skegness. The other half, they're spending nearly £200,000 to go deep down onto the ocean floor to look at things like the Titanic. Of course, very sad outcome. Many people saying it's time, though, for it to stop. Leave things like the Titanic alone. Stop with the danger tourism. Do we need to stop? Your thoughts?
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Charlotte Pickles and Paul Embry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Lots of you getting in touch about that situation in Essex, the 1,700 men. I need to be careful because I can't set myself back off again because we've only got till 7 and I'm not happy about it, everyone. Carol says, no, Michelle, you are not deluded. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Surely this can only end in trouble. Elizabeth says, you know, there's been a huge pushback against this by us locals. Why is nobody listening to us? I absolutely agree with you, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer. Jim says, Sunak needs to go. This is all wrong. Well, he's not going anywhere. Would you change the way that you vote in the next election? I suspect if this issue is still a big thing, many people would. Let's move on, though, because I've got a lot to pack in tonight. David, one of my viewers, you lead me nicely. You're saying, why can't our government look after its own servicemen and women before looking after people that didn't serve their country well? Did you know that tomorrow it is Armed Forces Day? Don't even ask me why the armed forces get a day and Pride and things like that get a whole month. Don't get me started on that one because, again, I'll be here all day. But anyway, do you think, let's cut to the chase, do you think we do respect our veterans enough, Charlotte?
I don't think there is enough support in place to ensure that for those incredibly brave men and women, I mean, how many of us would really, truly put our lives on the line in the way they do, to make sure they are looked after once they leave whichever service they've been in. And, you know, we keep hearing awful stories about veterans that have committed suicide because they've been passed from pillar to post trying to access services, and that is totally unacceptable. But I do think the government actually on this issue is, you know, led by Johnny Mercer, Minister for Veterans Affairs, is really trying to ensure there is the right services in place. Money is being put in. We now have an Office for Veterans Affairs. We never had that to try and shine a light on this group. But have we sorted it? Have we done enough? No.
Oh.
Well, they're willing, as Charlie said, they're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. They're willing to lay their lives on the line for their country. And the very least we can do is when they return to Civvy Street is give them all the support and sustenance that we can as a society to make sure that they can be reintegrated into normal life and that they have opportunities in the future. And frankly, we've been appalling at that. I think we should be much better at giving veterans career pathways. I've said before that I think some of them would make great teachers and, you know, get them into some of our schools teaching the kids. I think that would be mutually beneficial, but we don't seem to focus on things like that, and I think it's much to the detriment of our country
I tell you,
and the veterans themselves.
This country would be in a better place, wouldn't it, if we had ex-military as teachers. Can you imagine the kids? Oh, I love it. This is great. This right there is a policy idea right there. More veterans into schools as teachers. These kids, the country, I think, if you ask me, the country would be in a much better shape. But if you are a veteran, would you actually want that job of teaching some of the kids? Ugh,
Bring back national service, Dewbs?
Oh, hey, we did it. We debated that not long ago on Dewbs and Co. Many of you guys saying yes. And you talk about the ultimate sacrifice there. I'll leave you guys to get in touch about your thoughts on the veterans and whether or not we respect them and do enough. But the ultimate sacrifice, of course, we've all been gripped, haven't we, to that story about the Titan and its quest to go and have a look at the Titanic. We've followed that very closely. And, of course, We saw very sadly the tragic end to that tale last night. Of course, 5 people, including 3 British nationals, did very sadly lose their life. And it's sparked this huge conversation with so many different angles to it. Lots of voices, Charlotte was last night. Life's moved on. Lots of voices, Charlotte, saying that things like the Titanic should be left alone. Actually, one of the family relatives groups, they're speaking out a lot at the moment on a Facebook group saying they think it's disrespectful to their loved ones and all the rest of it, that people are trying to make a tourist attraction of the Titanic. They're calling for these trips and all the rest of it to be banned. Do you agree?
I think it's, in this instance, which obviously is, as you said, and we've all been tragically gripped by it, and obviously can't imagine what the families are going through now. But in this instance, it was a tourist trip. You know, this wasn't an exploration. Plenty of other trips have gone down to the Titanic. They weren't searching or exploring a new part of the ocean for us to understand, you know, what's going on in it. This was extreme tourism. That's absolutely what it was. And, you know, I can see how for families that have links to the Titanic tragedy, the original Titanic tragedy, might feel that this is quite gratuitous, you know, just being incredibly wealthy and being able to go down and see it. And yet there are lots of different sites, right, that we encourage people to go to. I mean, lots of Holocaust sites we want people to go and visit to remember them so that we don't forget. So I'm not sure it's quite that clear cut, but what I do think is that we need to think very carefully about allowing these kind of untested, properly tested submarines going down.
Paul?
I think the question is, if you say the Titanic's off limits, then where do you draw the line? I mean, I remember in 1982, I think it was, being a kid in school and we were all taken into the TV room to see the raising of the Mary Rose, which was...
And Mary Rose is amazing to visit.
Yeah, and you know, it was a fantastic thing to witness. And I completely take, you know, Charlie's point about this wasn't exploration. I get that. But nonetheless, I do think we need to encourage people to do this sort of thing. It's a sort of, we wouldn't have heard of the likes of Edmund Hillary, Neil Armstrong, Yuri Gagarin, people like that, if people weren't prepared to push the boundaries. And let's not get too much into the culture of safety.
You know, I say each to their own. I mean, of course, they've found bits of the debris now, haven't they, from the Titan. I'm showing the bits that they found on the seabed on the screen now, so you can see, I think it's up to about 5 parts there they have found. And to me, it's each to their own. If you want to do that with your time, your resources, your money and all the rest of it, you know the risks involved. Absolutely tragic, of course, for all the families and loved ones of these 5. But ultimately, it is a free world and it is your choice what you do with your time and your money, isn't it? Your thoughts? I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts of
Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, Charlotte Pickles and Paul Embry. The Dewberry Tavern is open. It's a Friday. Cheers, everybody. If you can't have a drink on a Friday, when can you? Peter says, I agree with the ex-fireman for the first time ever. There you go, that's a nice
Ex-fireman, ex-fireman. I'm still serving, thank you very much.
Oh, you know, when we get into that, then everyone will write in now going, if he's still serving, why has he got a beard? Then off on a tangent we go. So I'll nip that tangent right in the bud because we've got a lot to get through. But Peter says, anyway, he agrees with you for the first time ever because he says that the way we treat our workers in this country, it is disgusting. He says that is why the workforce goes abroad. Graham says all problems are caused by high energy prices. Lower them by using our available reserves of gas, oil and coal. And while we're at it, go all out for nuclear as well. You've teed my next point up very well, so you have, Graham, because Finland, bear with me, Finland, right, it's topped the UN's World Happiness Index again, right? This is the 6th time in a row. It's apparently a whoppingly happy country. Yes, you can sit there and you can say they've got lower income inequality, they've got free healthcare and all the rest of it. They've got saunas on every street corner as well, I happen to notice. But I'll tell you what I think would make the UK happier. Listen, look, I've got some good news for you. It is Friday night after all. Look what happened. We rant and rave about policing in this country, don't we, all the time? They get mocked for doing all of their dancing and all the rest of it. But look, they've done something very good today. Watch. Well, if you was listening, not watching, you don't know what was going on, I'll summarise that it was absolutely fabulous. And I think if more of this went on, the UK would be up there. It would be bumping the finish off the top spot when it comes to happiness because finally, everyone, yes, Just Stop Oil, they're doing their antics, wandering down the street. They were removed by the police. In 15 seconds, they were whipped off that road quicker than a quick thing from Quickland. I loved it. It made me happy. It's good news. It brought me a cheer and a smile internally for Friday, which is hard done today, as you can tell. What do you think to this whole kind of happiness nation and how we achieve it?
I mean, I don't know how you quantify it particularly because obviously as individuals, I think we are made happy by all sorts of different things. Some people are made happy by the sort of accrual of wealth and that's their lodestar in life. I think other people are driven by very simple things, you know, having a decent job and having a good, strong family around them, walks in the countryside, a visit to the pub and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'd say from our point of view, if it is possible to take an overall view on this, I think that we are a bit of what I would say is an undeveloping country at the moment. I don't think
undeveloping country.
We're an undeveloping country. I don't think we are particularly happy as a country. I think we're very fragmented. I think we're very atomised. I think we've got grotesque inequality in this country. I think nothing particularly works. I think the government is failing. I don't see any sign of that improvement
How long's
anytime
your
soon.
list?
And can we go? Well, we could go until midnight.
I'm going to
actually.
say this is supposed to be about being happy. Have you seen his list of unhappiness? Go on.
But that doesn't mean you can't be personally happy. And sitting here with you two, I'm ecstatic.
Boy,
so I finished on a flourish.
He did. He pulled it round in the end there. Well done. What do you think to this? What makes us a happy nation or not?
Well, I'm delighted to see the very speedy police response there to...
I'm going to play it again by the end of the programme. I'm going to play it again before we go. I am. So if my directors can tee that up, we'll end on a nice smile. Go on.
That's going to be Michelle's weekend
it is.
watching.
I'm going to replay it.
Do you know what? There's actually a lot of research into this topic. And whilst you're right to an extent, Paul, that people get happiness from different things, actually there's a really consistent body of evidence that shows that relationships and the quality of our relationships are the biggest thing determining whether we're happy. And that's not just, you mentioned it, strong families, friendship groups, but also just general social interactions and connections. You know, do you know the barista in a cafe near you? Do you know the pub landlord? You know, things like that, because it creates a sense of community and it creates a sense that you belong somewhere. And on top of that, I mean, you mentioned it, right? Having a decent job, feeling secure, you know, having a sense of agency. I mean, the reason that Take Back Control, not wanting to get into, but it is Brexit Day. The reason why Take Back Control resonates is because people felt like they want a sense of agency, right? They want control over their lives, and that makes you more happy.
If my football team, Wolverhampton Wanderers, have won on a Saturday afternoon, that is
joy.
unbridled joy. I would give everything for that.
Connection.
Something that, I mean, lots of you getting in touch about this serviceman. Dave said he had a superb former army colonel that taught him as a teacher who was his former housemaster. He said every single pupil there respected him. There was complete law and order in his classes. There was absolutely no messing about. That was in Norfolk. Laurie, you had ex-servicemen as your teachers as well. You said they did a wonderful job, albeit very brave. You said if any pupils defied them, core blimey, you knew about it. I think teachers, make them ex-military. I think that would sort out a lot of the problems in our society. Andy, you're saying that people shouldn't be going down to things like the Titanic. Treat it with respect and leave it alone. That's all I've got time for. It flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? Guess what, everyone? A real treat for you guys. Lee Anderson, his first programme, up next. For now, we've got to say goodbye. And I'm going to roll out with the credits, repeating a little bit of that Just Stop Oil video if I can. It'll cut off before the end, but hey, it's great. Get them off the streets. 15 seconds. Go on. I absolutely love it. Seconds gone. Yes, that's what you want, isn't it? Get them off. Good to see the police doing a good job. Fantastic. I love it. That's made me happy. Have a fantastic weekend. Do not go anywhere. Lee Anderson.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around